Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar of the Future Classroom Lab on Unlocking Potential AI's role in the classroom, AI, artificial intelligence. It's a pleasure to have you here. I am Eugenia Casariego, and I work for European SchoolNet, and I am very happy to be here with you today to be your host and to discuss something that is so very relevant to so many of you, so many educators and education professionals around the world. I'm also very excited to see that this webinar has generated such high interest from people from all over the world. I think there is 45 nationalities that I at least know of in this session today. So please type on the comments where you're connecting from and what you're teaching and what's your role in education field. So welcome everyone, and thank you for connecting this afternoon. Before I introduce our speakers, and for those of you who do not know us yet, European SchoolNet mission is to inspire and to support the 34 member ministers of education that compose our network. And as well our lively community of which you are part of, teachers, experts, education professionals, but also industry partners by whom we are joined this afternoon. And we try to foster innovation in education in Europe. We do this by identifying and testing promising innovative practices, sharing evidence about the possible or potential impact of these practices, and supporting mainstream teaching and learning practices that are aligned with the 21st century standards for inclusive and fair education. The Future Classroom Lab is one of our initiatives. I like to think of it as an ecosystem that brings together experts such as yourselves, but also educators and teachers and also policymakers. And it's an inspirational environment that is located physically in Brussels, but also it's something that it's also online in a way, as this webinar is online right now. So today's webinar is organized in collaboration with Lenovo, which is a multinational corporation that is known for its innovation in the technology sector. Lenovo, we're very proud to say that Lenovo is one of our industry partners at the Future Classroom Lab, and this is with whom we are partnering today to deliver this very interesting webinar. Today we will discuss the role of artificial intelligence, AI, in the classroom, and how we as educators can make the most of AI-powered tools and to boost efficiency in teaching practice. We're going to discuss a few key questions related to these, but we're also going to have the chance to actually see a demonstration of how in practice you can bring AI into your classroom, into your teaching practice. So I would like to welcome online the speakers for today. Rasmus Borsch, who's working at Lenovo EMEA region in education solutions. Hello, Rasmus. Very happy to have you. We will be joined as well by Simon Johnson, which is a senior education consultant at Tablet Academy, and last but not least, Delia De Cursi, which is a senior strategist at Lenovo Worldwide Education Team. Before I pass on the floor to Rasmus, I just want to mention that there will be time for questions through the webinar and also at the end of the webinar. So please don't hesitate to type in the chat any comments, questions, or thoughts that our discussion is generating. I'm sure that many of you already come here with some ideas, so we would love to have them. And please ask your questions. We will make sure to have some time to answer these questions. The webinar is recorded, so after the webinar, towards the end of the week, you'll have access to this recording to make sure that you don't miss anything. So without further delay, Rasmus, the floor is yours. Very welcome, and thank you for being here today.
So thank you so much, Eugenia, and hello to everyone sitting out there. Was it 45 countries and 300 people? That's very impressive. And I would say, just before we start on the webinar, so education is one place where we see a very, very fast adoption of AI, but it's something from a Lenovo standpoint that we see in every industry. So AI is on everyone's lips, and actually AI is everywhere, right? So today we will not be discussing AI in the wider sense of the word. We'll be looking into generative AI in the context of school. And I have a few slides to share. So let me just pull them up. There you go. And can we go back a few slides? There you go. So yes, this is the title. Eugenia already told you that. We'll be looking at what is the potential of generative AI in the classroom. And we'll be doing so for the next, I guess now it's 55 minutes. So we're well into the introduction already. We'll have a panel discussion where Delia and Simon will be discussing teaching and learning with the generative AI. Then we'll head into a CoPilot demo where Simon will be demonstrating what is the potential, how can you use this in the classroom. We'll have a Q&A session, and we'll finish with a conclusion. As for the questions, you'll feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout the panel discussion, throughout the demo. We'll be collecting the questions from the panel discussion towards the end of that discussion, and again at the end of the CoPilot demo, just to make sure that things flow and that we keep time so that you get back to your families and your dinner and what else you have to do. So once again, thank you for joining. I just want to finish off before we head into the introduction of Simon and Delia to let you know what is the purpose from our side. Right, we've dealt and we're dealing today with 3 key questions. So the first one we want to discuss is, what is the significance of AI in the context of education? And I think this is something that is on the lips and minds of everyone these days. And there are many opinions on this, but we'll give it a go and have a discussion on that today. We'll also be discussing what are the potential pitfalls, what are the limitations, what do we need to think about, and how can we deal with these? And lastly, and this is also very much in terms of what we'll be seeing in the demo, how can this be used in the teaching and learning scenarios of your everyday? So with that, I'd like to say hello to both Delia and Simon. Delia is my dear colleague, joining us from the US. She sits in our worldwide team, and Simon from Tablet Academy are also our worldwide partner on professional development. And they'll be joining me for the panel discussion. And I'll let them introduce themselves. So Delia, would you say a few words about yourself?
Oh, sure. Hi, Rasmus. So good to be here with you and with all the educators that have joined us today. Thanks for taking the time out to be part of this conversation. So I am a former educator of 25 years in the US. I'm based at the Lenovo headquarters in North Carolina. And so previously I taught middle school, so grades 7 and 8. I've taught high school, and I also taught university for a few years. I've been a principal, I've been a professional development consultant. And 5 years ago, I started working on the education team at Lenovo. So really excited to be here today. And Simon, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you. So my name is Simon. Like Delia, I'm a former teacher. I worked in college and high school, teaching computing and ICT. And I'm now a senior consultant at a company called the Tablet Academy, helping teachers to adopt technology and helping them to support them with tools like artificial intelligence and Microsoft CoPilot, which we'll look at today.
Yeah, and finally, I can just say a few words about myself. So I'm Rasmus. I sit on the education team in EMEA. I'm also a former teacher, and I've spent the past 20 years in the education industry. And with that, I think we can start today's conversation. And I'd really like to start with a question which is broad and wide, and for both you, Simon, and you, Delia, and you can decide who wants to start. But the first thing I want to ask you is, why is generative AI relevant in education? So anybody want to give it a go?
I'm happy to jump in, because when I am asked this question, and it's something I get asked a fair amount, I always think about Sundays and how I spent so many Sundays writing lesson plans. And Sundays were kind of the hardest part of the week. I taught English language arts, so I did a lot of grading of writing, essays throughout my education career. And then I was a very diligent lesson planner. And so I think that generative AI is potentially game-changing for educators when it comes to writing robust lesson plans and also differentiating learning resources for students. I'm not an advocate at this point of having generative AI grade your papers, but I do think that it can give pretty good formative feedback to students on their writing. So just from a time-saving standpoint, so that teachers can have more balance in their lives and even have more time for their students, I think that it is potentially revolutionary. And I think that that personalization element when it comes to differentiated materials can be incredibly helpful for students. But curious to hear what Simon thinks about that.
So I would totally agree with you, Delia. We have in the UK, we have a retention issue with teachers, keeping teachers once they start, and it's because of workload, the amount of planning, the amount of resources they have to create. So AI has the potential to reduce that workload and keep those teachers in the profession and doing what they do well, rather than all the bureaucracy. I also believe that it's important that both teachers and students are aware of the technologies, because this is a technology that's not going to go away, and potentially the students that we're teaching now are going to be using this technology when they leave school. I use it in my job and it helps me a lot, and we need to teach the students how to use these tools responsibly and ethically as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was looking at some numbers the other day. The estimate is that about 60% of jobs will be augmented by generative AI in the next 3 to 5 years. That's a really high number. So it is so important that our students know how to, at the very least, know how to write effective prompts to use generative AI, but I think also have some basic understanding of how the technology works, so they know whether it's responsible and ethical, and that their use of it is responsible and ethical as well.
Does any of you know any present day examples of how this is changing the workforce or the jobs that we're seeing? Is that already happening, or is this another of the predictions, one of the predictions that we've seen so many times before? Is it already happening anywhere outside of education as well? And you already mentioned where it's, taking some of the workload off the teachers, but what else are we seeing? Do you have any good examples of this?
So go on, David.
No, go ahead. Jump in, Simon.
So I've seen some good examples of how helping companies with productivity. AI is great at analysing lots of amount of data and providing insights that they can use to improve sales, improve productivity. I often get asked the question, will AI take over my job? And I heard a lovely quote recently where someone said, no, AI is not going to take over jobs, but people who use AI will replace the jobs of those people that don't use AI.
Yes, I've heard that as well. The number I read the other day is that only about 7% of jobs will be taken over by automation. So that's a relatively low number. Another use case and example in addition to the ones that Simon has brought up is HR processes that AI is being used on that front. And then also in terms of like building management. So making sure that we're that companies and institutions are maximizing their water usage, their energy usage, so they can have AI help with that kind of management so that they are shrinking their carbon footprint. So there's a lot of different use cases out there that are starting to be used by companies, but I think productivity is probably number one. And so whether that is a company saying, okay, across the board, we're going to empower all of our workers to use a generative AI productivity platform, or it's individual workers. I mean, I have plenty of friends who are saying, yeah, I'm using it on a regular basis to write emails, to summarize. Of course, at Lenovo, we have a pilot. I'm part of the CoPilot pilot. And so, the company is really looking at productivity levels among users. And it's a year-long pilot. So it's certainly happening.
Yep. Yeah, and I think a good example saying Lenovo, because we're certainly seeing it within the walls of our own company a lot. So yeah, but let's look back at school and what this means to teachers. I think you mentioned that it's taking off the workload potentially on some of the Sunday evenings. Where else do you see teachers benefiting from the technology? Simon, perhaps I should start with you.
Yeah, so I'm starting to see teachers use it a lot for creating resources. So things like lesson plans, creating worksheets, even writing medium-term plans, schemes of work. But for me, the biggest impact is, as Delia mentioned earlier and touched on, is this personalised learning. So making sure that what you create, your lessons are accessible and relevant to all the students you teach.
I think the other thing is when I was teaching, I always felt like I wish I could clone myself, because I tried to do a lot of one-on-one work with students around their writing. And I loved writing instruction, but you can't clone yourself. And the thing that's nice about a platform like CoPilot is that it can function as a personalized tutor for students. I mean, they can really have a conversation with the AI, the generative AI platform, to ask for help or to be a thought partner or a brainstorming partner, or even to simulate a quiz or a test so that they can get ready for a coming assessment. So I'm hopeful that that means more robust learning support for students, and I think that certainly is useful for teachers. The other thing I think about is looking at very quickly being able to analyze formative assessment data and knowing which students need targeted remediation or those that can be accelerated. And so AI can be really useful in terms of saving time around that analysis and recommendations for students. So as long as, of course, that the caveat there is you want to make sure that the data that you're feeding the platform, that you've got an enterprise license and that data is protected. And that might be something we want to talk about a little bit later. You know, what are you feeding the large language model? Yeah.
I think another thing as well is as a former teacher, it helps to keep you fresh. So you can use AI to suggest new ways to teach a topic you've taught for years, new ways to engage your students as well.
So actually, perhaps this is a good time for a call out to the audience, because I think, we have almost 300 teachers sitting online. Perhaps in the chat, some of you could write what you do with AI and how you're engaging with your students, and we'll pick those up later. But it would just be interesting to hear from you how you feel about AI, what you use it for, where you think it's difficult. So please just take your time to write in whatever you feel, and we'll pick it up as we go. And so now we've looked at AI really briefly from a sort of an overarching viewpoint, saying, so what is it good for? Where do we see it? We've also talked a little bit about what is it good for in terms of how can it help the teacher. But schools are there for the students, right? So and generative AI may be the future of the students, but they're in school today. So how can AI help students, or how can it challenge students in different ways in the classroom today? Delia, would you start?
Well, I brought up a couple of the use cases already. I think that simulation, teachers can actually set up simulations using well-created prompts. And that was something I hadn't really thought about until I went to a training on intermediate and advanced prompting for productivity platforms. So you can give the AI a whole scenario that you want it to engage in with the student. Pretend that you are X and you're doing Y, and and so students can really be set up to do kind of explorations of situations, whether they're scientific or humanities based, but also then that practice testing and practice quizzes. So I mean, there are a lot of actually universities we see here in the States now who are setting up AI tutors and course chatbots for, like, it's available for any course on campus. And so that kind of personalized help, I think, will be game changing for students. The key, though, is that students need to have the AI literacy to know how to best use it, what kinds of questions to ask, how does the help change based on how you formulate the prompt. So that's a new skill for us, for all of us.
Yeah. And Simon?
Yeah, I agree totally with all those points. Definitely, as I mentioned before, personalizing learning, but also being able to take a concept, especially a really difficult or technical concept, and then asking AI to suggest ways to make that more accessible, or come up with analogies or different ways to make that resonate with the students. Also, AI is great at taking something that's very descriptive and bringing it to life. And I often say, how can a child understand something that they've never experienced that for themselves? So I've seen great examples where a teacher's take a description of a medieval village and got AI to reproduce it as an image, so the students can understand and see what that would look like. Because I don't know many students that I've taught that have actually been or lived in a medieval village, but AI can produce that.
That's a good example, and I can see from the chat that there's tons of examples coming in. Thanks a lot. I thought I would give everyone a thumbs up or a clapping hands, but there are too many. So it's not that I'm picking out some, but I'll just pick out a few. And you know, so Irina, I'm not gonna pronounce your second name because I'm probably not gonna do it right. But you're asking a question, right? How can AI tools be tailored to meet with the diverse needs of students with varying learning styles and abilities? And I think that's a really interesting question. We'll come back to that in a second. And then Sarah, you used it for presentation purposes and activities, read PDF and pictures, and also create education videos. Let me see, Canon. I can create engaging content for students. I saw somebody writing something with saving time, and that echoes what has been said here as well. So just reading through what you're writing to us, you really says something about AI being one of the fastest spreading technologies we've ever seen, and something that's being rapidly adopted in many different ways. So the funny thing about having an expert webinar like this is that we have two experts sitting here, but then you're also, all of you, doing stuff already, which makes it so much more interesting to have a dialogue. So keep it going, please. And then I'll come back to the question. I just need to find it again. Yeah, Delia and Simon, how can AI tools be tailored to meet with the diverse needs of students with varying learning styles and abilities? I think, will you come back to that in your demo, or could you say a few words about it, Simon?
Yeah, so I will demo this, but one thing that AI is good at is changing the language, whether that's translation or the actual level of the language of text. So you could take a document, feed that into AI and ask it to change the reading level for the child, or you can ask to create a help guide or a fill in the gaps worksheet to support that guide. You can also ask it to provide strategies to help students with different abilities and different needs, and you can specify what those needs are, and it will do that for you.
And that's fantastic. Delia, do you have any comments?
Well, I was just thinking about the fact that, for example, with CoPilot or even with Gemini, you can, rather than a student having to type in their prompt, they can just use the voice to text functionality. So that makes it very accessible in that sense. But then, yeah, as Simon was saying, that the platform can change, and the student can even say, if the student gets a response back that's too complex, they can say, please put this at a 3rd grade reading level or a 1st grade reading level so I can understand this more easily, or summarize this into bullets. So, you know, breaking apart a lot of text, or taking a PDF and asking for a summary of that. So if the text is too dense. So I think there's actually a lot of opportunities for students who have learning differences where AI could be really helpful.
So basically, AI comes with a great promise in many different aspects, and perhaps that's a good segue to ask the difficult question, which is, we talked about all the good things, all the promises, all the potentials. What are the pitfalls you're seeing? And I would encourage our audience to write whatever concerns you have, what pitfalls you're seeing, what difficulties you have in engaging and using AI. Just write them in, and we'll bring some of you in. But I will post the question for you first, Delia, and then I'll pass it on to Simon.
Well, I mentioned what I see as the biggest pitfall earlier in the webinar, which is that users are not always cognizant of feeding data to large language model. I mean, there are certain models, ChatGPT, for example, when you put your information, your prompt, or you share a document with that large language model, it's feeding the model. The model is training on it. So you want to be very careful about the information that you provide it. Now, if you have an enterprise license, say for Microsoft CoPilot, your data is protected. And so Microsoft is very explicit that they're not using that data to train the model. It is protected. And so you really need to look at the terms of service for whatever AI-enabled tools you're using. Like if you're using Magic School or, you know, ChatGPT, whatever version you're using of that, and so that you're aware. And we need to teach our students to do the same thing, so they know where their data is going and how it's being used. And otherwise, it's out there. I mean, there have been some really crazy examples of data information being fed into public large language models that should not have been information that should not have been put out there, like in the corporate world. So don't do that. And certainly don't do that with your students' data. That's the other key thing here for teachers to be thinking about. Simon, thoughts about this? Perils?
Yeah, so I totally agree with what you're saying, and we've got to be careful about what data we supply AI and ensure that the tools we're using are compliant, especially if you're in Europe or UK, compliant with the GDPR. I think, is it the California Protection Act? Is it in the US? It's something similar. But then also, I have concerns about bias, and I'll talk about this briefly when I do my demo. But because the AI is essentially trained on everything that was ever published online, it also inherits the bias from those as well. I saw an interesting video this week. I'm not going to say the company that launched it, but they created images of Barbie for different nationalities, and some of those images inherited biases and stereotypes from images it found online that were potentially harmful or racist. So we've got to be careful about what we produce using AI and make sure we check that before we pass it on to the client or the student or whoever the third party is. My other only concern about AI is about experience. So AI is great at creating lesson plans and resources, but what I find is that sometimes it will create something that's just knock it out the park, fantastic. Sometimes it will actually create absolute rubbish or garbage. Most of the time it creates something that's quite good and needs tweaking or improving. My concern is that when I first started teaching, that one of the biggest challenges as a teacher was workload and creating lesson plans. So if I had AI now, I would jump straight into AI, ChatGTP, Magic School, CoPilot, get it to create my lessons. But because I hadn't got the experience and knowledge of what a good lesson plan looks like, I don't essentially know whether what AI is giving me is correct or useful for my students. So that's another conversation about how we mentor new teachers in using this new technology.
Yeah, and I think that's so. In the interest of time, I'll speed it up a little bit here. There are a few questions that I'd like to cover, but I also want to, and perhaps this segues into that. What you're mentioning is, so how do we make sure that the people in the classroom, the teachers, are able to use AI in an ethical manner and also teach the students how to do this? And so I think that it would be interesting to have your view on how you should do that. How do you implement something like AI in a responsible way? And I'll start with you, Simon, and I'll finish with you, Delia, because then after that we'll take a few questions and we'll segue into the demo.
First of all, training is essential with any new technology, whether not just AI, but also I think it's important for any organization, school or college to make sure that they have a responsible use policy. We have it for ICT, we've had that for ages, but we need it for AI now. And to train teachers and make them aware of the limitations and know how to use it ethically and responsibly. And just like we do when we're checking sources online and fact checking, it's the same thing with AI.
So absolutely agree with everything Simon just said. And at the institutional level, it's important that there's clear policies and guidance in place for how teachers can use these platforms and how students can use these platforms, what's okay. And that probably will be informed by the European Commission's guidelines on AI, or should be. But I do want to just hit for a moment on AI literacy. So Simon referenced the importance of training. So not only do we need to make sure that we're empowering teachers with AI literacy, but also students, right? So we'll empower the teachers with AI literacy, and then they can then in turn teach the students. I do want to share a number of resources that are available. I just published an article in EdTech Digest about AI literacy that has a lot of good links around curriculum that can be used with students to educate them about AI, how it works, how to prompt, what does responsible and ethical AI look like. So if Andre, if you could start to share those resources in the chat, that would be great. The other resource that I think is phenomenal, very robust, is Microsoft's course on using Microsoft CoPilot for education. It's self-paced, it is free. So we'll put the link to that course in the chat also. I believe you can get a certificate at the end for completion. And I would encourage anyone who has not checked that out to take a look, because I think you'll find that super useful.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot, Delia. And so, Simon, before we head into the demo, there are sort of two questions I would give you, and then you can start the demo, right? One is from Konstantina. Again, second name Konstantina. I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce it in any way. So you're asking, what is the difference of ChatGPT and Copilot in relation to teaching English? And that's a very specific question, but I think it's indicative of the dilemma we're all in, understanding how AI can be leveraged. And the second question is it possible to use AI with first, second, and third graders aged 6 to 9? Another great question, because it touches on the ethical aspects as well as on what can the technology actually do, where is it relevant? And so, Simon, perhaps you could start with those questions and then head it into your demo. And so I'll leave you with Simon for the next about 30 minutes before we close the session. Yeah. So over to you, Simon.
Okay. So in answer to the first question, which is a very good question, that Microsoft CoPilot is actually built on ChatGPT, and you actually, as part of the free personal and the enterprise version, you have access to ChatGPT-4 inside Microsoft CoPilot for free. You don't have all the extra add-ons that you get with ChatGPT-4, but you get access to that large language model and all the latest features. So that's something to be aware of. So anything you can do in ChatGPT, you can do in Microsoft CoPilot. With regards to age, if you look at a lot of the legal documents around OpenAI, ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, you have to be age 13 to have a legal contract with OpenAI or Microsoft to be able to use their services. In fact, even if you have the enterprise version of Microsoft Copilot in your school or college, it's only for faculty and higher ed students. So no person under the age of 18 can use those tools. That's not to say that students will be using them at home and lying about their age, which is again another reason why it's important for students to be aware of these tools and understand the limitations and also know how to use them safely and ethically. But there's nothing stopping using AI to help younger students, but you've got to think about whether it's appropriate for them to actually use those tools. And just remember that they should be at least 13 to be able to have an email and have an open contract, to have a contract with those tools. I hope that answers those questions.
Yeah, and there are tons more coming in and comments as well. So, but I think, Simon, it's a good time for you to start the demo, and we'll keep looking at the comments thread. So please keep them coming, and we'll collect towards the end all your questions or the ones that we can cover in the time we've left. So over to you, Simon.
Okay. Hopefully you can see my screen. Perfect. So I thought I'd start by just explaining what AI is and just provide some context, because it has implications on how we use it. So AI sounds like a new thing, but in fact it's been around since the 1940s, 1950s. It was Alan Turing that came up with the first definition of AI, and he defined it as a computer or robot that can think and process information in the same way that humans can. He actually believed that by the year 2000, computers would be so powerful that they could rival human intelligence. We're not anywhere near that just yet. But then in the 1960s, computer scientists started to experiment with an idea called machine learning. And this is a field of AI which explores the ability for computers to learn from their experience. And this has implications, as we mentioned already, for when we're using AI to support teaching and learning. And then the latest iteration of AI is generative AI. So this is the ability for AI to create images, text, videos, or even music from scratch as if they had authored it like a human. So I want to start by demoing Microsoft CoPilot, and I want to show you the difference between AI and a search engine. So I'm going to launch CoPilot. Now you can access CoPilot by going to copilot.microsoft.com or microsoft.com/copilot. This is what it looks like. So this is the interface. It always gives you some suggestions on things you can do. So find a question, answer a question, explain something, create some art. If you're using the Enterprise Edition, you have this green tick in the top right-hand corner, which means your data is protected. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then down here is your chat tool. It is a chat bot, and I'll talk about the benefits of that in a moment and the differences. So unlike a search engine where I would ask a question and then the search engine would search for the best results based on keywords, CoPilot is like having your own personal assistant, whereas you give them a question, they will go and find the best answers and then give you that back. So for example, I could ask it, what is Microsoft CoPilot and how can it help me as a teacher? So here's its answer. So Microsoft CoPilot is an AI-powered assistant designed to help you with a wide range of tasks. These include lesson planning, grading and feedback, content creation, data analysis, administrative tasks. Now, something to be aware of is that CoPilot, same as ChatGPT and other generative AI, is a conversational chatbot. So you can have a conversation with it. So I can push back and say, thank you. I'm always polite to AI, and I think we should all be polite to AI. Thank you. Can you tell me more about administrative tasks? So I want to know admin tasks. How can it make my job better by doing admin tasks? And I didn't have to specify that I was a teacher again because it's still in that same conversation. It remembers what I said before. So here we go, scheduling and calendar management, email management. I can draft and reply to emails, prioritize emails, and so on and so forth. And it'll even give you suggestions of more conversations you can have. So can it assist with grading or record keeping? What are the limitations of what CoPilot can do? So that's essentially how CoPilot works. Also notice here in the top right-hand corner, we've got the new chat. Because it's conversational, it will remember what you said. So if I want to start a new topic, so I wanted to create a presentation on volcanoes or ask it another question, I can just click on new chat to start a new conversation. So why Microsoft CoPilot? So remember, I mentioned machine learning. This is the ability of AI to remember and learn from its experiences. There is potential that anything that we supply or type in the prompts in AI will remember and can use that when it gives someone else an answer. I saw a post on LinkedIn recently with 120 top tools, AI tools used by teachers. And I asked myself, how many of those actually protect the data that you enter and keep your data secure? The reason why we recommend Microsoft CoPilot, if you have the Enterprise Edition, it protects your data. So searches are not linked to your accounts. The chat data is not used to train the AI, and no one at Microsoft can view your data. Essentially, your data is protected as long as you see that shield with the little green tick. You can access CoPilot in different ways. So via Bing, by typing in microsoft.com/Copilot. You can use the CoPilot button in Edge. You can also use the CoPilot button on the desktop and mobile versions, and you can even use CoPilot directly in Teams if you have the premium version. So what can you do? So you can draft contents, you can create lesson plans and create resources. You can personalize learning, so you can change the reading level of a passage of text, or you can create a worksheet to help those students. You can come up with ideas for discussion prompts or to help with group work. You can also summarize large documents like PDFs in Edge. And you can also use it for day-to-day tasks like helping with your calendar and also responding to emails. So let's have a look at a simple example. So one of the most common things teachers use AI for is to create a lesson plan. So I'm going to go back into CoPilot, and because it's new, I'm going to start a new chat, and I'm going to type in create a lesson plan for an English lesson on alliteration. And I'm going to specify my grade. So I'm in the UK, so I would say for year 5. And let's base it on the Gruffalo. I love the Gruffalo, so based on text from the Gruffalo. And I click on send, and it'll start to create my lesson plan. So as you can see, it's listing my learning objectives, materials that I need for my lesson. We've got some activities. So we've got an activity where we read aloud examples on the Gruffalo and then get the students to identify alliteration. We've got a group activity task, and we've even got some areas for assessment. As I mentioned before, I often find that AI will sometimes create a fantastic lesson plan or fantastic resource. Sometimes it will actually produce absolute rubbish, absolute garbage. Most of the time it creates something that's quite good that I as a teacher have to tweak or modify or fit into my lesson. So I could push back and say again, thank you, always be polite, thank you. I'm going to say, can you make this 60 minutes long, and suggest some follow-up activities, maybe for homework. And it will do that. So it'll redesign my lesson. So it might be that you don't actually like the main activity, and you could push back and say, well, can you change the main activity? Can you do this? I have this idea, and it will do that for you. And it'll provide follow-up questions as well. Now, there is an art to writing prompts. I love this quote: feed CoPilot garbage and you'll get prettier garbage. The analogy I use is, imagine if you asked a child to empty the dishwasher. In my mind, I know that, or I think that means empty the dishwasher and put the dishes, the cutlery in the drawers and the cupboards. But unless you specify to that child to place all the dishes in the right place, emptying the dishwasher might mean just taking the things out of the dishwasher and putting them on the side. Sometimes you have to treat AI like a child. The more specific and the more instructions and information you can give it, the better is the response. So this is a method that I use quite a lot. Provide the AI with persona. So who would be the expert writing the answer? So you say you are a teacher, you're a primary teacher, K-12 teacher. Then provide the objective. So what task you want the AI to do, write me a lesson plan, create a resource, say who it is for. So it could be for children, Key Stage 2, K-12, Year 1. Give it a bit of extra information to help it understand what it needs, and then give it specific directions or limitations. So that could be the length of the lesson or the number of words if it's a reply to an email or a letter. So what else can you do? You can. So I've got my lesson plan, and from my lesson plan, I'm now going to, I'll just go back to my slide. I'm going to create a worksheet to follow up that task. So if I go back to my CoPilot prompt, now I've got a list of prompts that I have already created. And this is my top tip. As you start creating and writing prompts for AI, when you have ones that work for you, save it, keep it, and use it for later. So I'm going to ask it to list all the essential vocabulary terms, so all the words the students will need to know for this lesson. And there we go, it'll go away and do that. I can also get it to create a worksheet. So it might be that to help my students, to support them, I might want to create a fill in the gaps worksheet with keywords to help them with the task. So here's the prompt that I've saved. So I've said create a worksheet which includes a model example, so a description of the Gruffalo with instructions for students on how to write their monster description. I'll click on send. So we've got sections for the students to write their name and date, instructions, read the model example, come up with your own ideas, write a description. Here's an example. Okay, and then there's even a section for the students to write their ideas and to help build their own answer. So what else can you do? You can also use it to personalize learning. So it might be that you want to suggest strategies, and we talked about this earlier, different ways to support the lesson to help more students, make it more accessible and more inclusive. So come up with different tasks, visual aids, ideas to support group work. We could also create a fill in the gaps exercise, which I'm going to try now. So let's try that one. So I'm going to ask it to create a fill in the gaps exercise to help students with this task. So I said create a worksheet with fill in the gaps exercise focused on describing monsters using similes and metaphors suitable for this lesson. So again, we've got a section for name and date. Instructions, it's provided me some examples for the students to understand what I'm looking for, what a good one looks like. And then here we got fill in the gaps. The monster's fur was soft as, its teeth were as sharp as, and the students fill in those. And then it's even, I didn't ask it to do this, but it has. It's even as an extension task, create your own sentences which use similes and metaphors. So what else can you do? So you can use it to create quizzes. So you can get it to create a multiple choice quiz to gain understanding of how well the students have understood the lesson. If you use Microsoft Forms, which I do, you can then copy that quiz with the answers, paste it into a Word document. And then if Microsoft Forms, if you click on Quick Import and upload from this device, choose quiz, and not only will it create the self-marking quiz for you, it will automatically tick the correct answers for you, and all you have to do is press on send and share, and you've got a self-marking quiz in seconds. I absolutely love that feature. You can use it to create units of work, so complete schemes, so you can get to suggest activities and lessons for a 5 or 6 week course. You can use it for engagement, as we mentioned before, come up with new strategies and new ideas to teach something that you may have taught before, or make it more relevant to your students, maybe using popular culture. I once did a lesson on music around the theme of Baby Shark. And it's also great for coming up with ideas to support collaborative learning, particular prompts. So you can come up with thought-provoking questions to start a prompt, or start a debate or discussion. And then if that discussion or debate starts to slow down, you can get it to come up with follow-up questions to keep the conversation going. And then finally, you can also use it to create images. Now, the first time I saw this demonstrated, someone created an image of a cute furry kitten on roller skates, because who doesn't want to see a cute furry kitten on roller skates? The problem is, I asked myself the question, but how would I use this picture of a cute furry kitten in my lessons? AI, particularly text-to-image AI, is very good at creating images from very descriptive writing. So imagine that activity around the Gruffalo or creating a monster. One of the tasks was the students to see a picture of a monster and then describe it using similes or metaphors or alliteration. Where am I getting that picture for the monster from? I can use AI to create that monster. So I'm going to go back to CoPilot. I'm going to take my prompt, and I'm going to paste in here, create a picture or create an image. Now you can choose different styles. So you can say create a painting, create an illustration, a diagram. I've said create a hyper-realistic image of a cute furry monster with sharp teeth, sharp claws, bright yellow glowing eyes, black fur and horns. The more descriptive you are, the better. Top tip, if you're using this with children, make sure you add the word cute. So I click on submit and it'll start to create my image. So this image I can use in my worksheet to support my students so they can see what a good one looks like, and then they can describe the character, or you could use it as a hook. So imagine the children have created their own monsters. I saw a similar example where children had to create their own Pokemon. And then you could take their descriptions, put those descriptions into AI and bring their ideas to life. So there we go. He's quite cute little monster. But also AI is great at bringing books to life. I said before, how can a child visualize something that's never experienced it? AI is good at bringing those images to life. So it could be an image of medieval Britain, or it could be an image to encourage them to start a new story. So it could be a door that opens into a magical kingdom. You can also use it to create resources for your PowerPoint. So you might be teaching a lesson on volcanoes. So you might want a nice, powerful image of a volcano for your PowerPoint presentation. So here's another example. So create a hyper-realistic image of an erupting volcano with lightning striking through the ash clouds. The scene should be dramatic and intense. Now, my top tip for this is you can even ask Microsoft CoPilot to write prompts for you to use in the image generator. So if you want a picture of a volcano, great. But if you want to make that really dramatic, you can put in, here's a description, create an image of a volcano, and then get CoPilot to make it even better. So I quite like those. I'm happy to use those in my presentations. So hopefully that's given you some ideas of how you can use AI in your classroom, and some suggestions you might try after this call. Maybe adapt a lesson plan or modify a scheme of work using CoPilot. Use CoPilot to create personalized learning activities or resources. Use the image creator to create a starter or stimulus for creating writing exercise, or bring your children's work to life, or create a self-marking quiz using CoPilot and Microsoft Forms.
Okay, thanks a lot, Simon. So just one question from me, which is actually not in the chat. and I know you've probably touched on this, but just to make sure that people understand, how much of this can you do with the free version and how much can you do with the paid one, right? I think that's the question that everyone dabbles with.
Yeah, so everything that I've demoed in this session was using the free version. Everything.
Yeah, so you can actually do quite a lot without the license.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's important to get across. Okay, thank you so much, Delia. Are you still here? Can we bring Delia out?
Thank
Oh, there you
you.
go.
So I'm here, but my camera decided not to work. So
Lenovo is there.
Club Lenovo is still here. Yes.
Oh, that's great. So there are so many good questions. I'm just gonna bring out a few, but I'll start with the one from Valentina Milanese. I hope I pronounced that correctly. What do you think are AI limitations when it comes to supporting learning? Is there something that they cannot be trusted with? And I think that's a really great question, right? And so you've spoken a lot, Simon. You can have some water while Delia get a chance to answer this.
Yeah, I actually just put a brief response in the chat to say that the hallucinations are a major limitation, and they're very real. If any of you are familiar with Ethan Mollick, and he speaks about this a lot. He is a professor of innovation at the University of Pennsylvania and wrote a book called Co-Intelligence that talks all about generative AI. And so he reports on the degree of hallucination on a regular basis because he tests these large language models, all of them, all the time. And so we as users really have to look out for that. We have to really examine the responses we're getting and be able to evaluate whether the responses are credible or not. And I have had this experience when I've been doing research, and I'll say, I want statistics for, global statistics, or I want US statistics. And then I switch the prompt and say, I want those same statistics for Asia. Well, the model will give me the exact same statistics and just say they're for Asia, and they're not. So that's a very minor example, but we have to help our students be critical thinkers when it comes to looking at the responses that they're getting from generative AI. So that's a really important skill. It's not like generative AI is just going to do all their work for them. They have to be critical thinkers in terms of what they're getting back from the platform. So.
Yeah, so I think that's actually, because we're running out of time, I just want to echo, Georgia, you had a very valid point that you also answered in the chat, Delia, around the fact that internet data will be the basis of the next generations of AI, and how do we deal with that? And so there are so many questions coming up. But the one question that Simon and Delia and I discussed when we were planning this discussion was really, so everything is, there's a huge opportunity for education here. But as with everything else, to be able to leverage this in a large system at a large scale, we really need to build an ecosystem that embraces this in the right way, right? And so I think that's for another day to discuss in detail what comes into an ecosystem that embraces generative AI. And with that question, we're not going to answer that. I think I'll hand it back to Eugenia to close up. And thank you so much for all your great comments and questions and interactions. It's been super great for us as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to the three of you. What a journey, what a journey. We've been through, we've taken a deep dive into AI and its role in education. We've discussed pressing questions such as, will AI replace our jobs, but also how we can better leverage AI, how we can use it to adapt it to different, to learners' different skills. We've also touched base upon the potentials of AI and where AI is going. And last but not least, we've taken as well a journey with Simon and an incredible live demonstration on how to use CoPilot, which once again, I would like to remind you this very important point that all of the tools and all of the prompts that Simon has used has been with the free version of CoPilot. So you can already get inspired, get started with what Simon has shown us, including those cute monsters. That was a nice thing to see. On a lighter tone, I like that Simon mentioned as well, we must be polite to AI. So that's actually a great, that's actually a great point. But I would also like to summarize by just bringing back a few of the comments that we heard from our speakers today, and is that it's important to try things out. It's important to get our way around AI. It's great as well that so many of you have commented through the webinar on the different ways in which you use AI. I see that there is a large percentage of you that use it to save time, but many of you actually use it as well for creating worksheets, materials, and evaluations. So this is great. I see that so many of you actually are currently using AI in your education practice. So I encourage you to continue doing so. And now you have one more tool in your arsenal, which is CoPilot. And thanks to Simon, we have actually great new tips on how we can get started with that. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I hope that you have taken some valuable lessons out of today's session. But of course, and very especially so, wholehearted thank you to our Future Classroom Lab partner, Lenovo. But of course, very warm thank you to Rasmus, to Simon, to Delia for joining us this afternoon and providing some really incredible insights into the use of AI in the classroom and how we can use it to empower our students. So once again, thank you. As we mentioned on the chat, the link, the recording will be available on the Future Classroom Lab dedicated website. We'll also email it to the registered participants. There will be more webinars coming up in the coming weeks, so I encourage you to follow the Future Classroom Lab social media. We're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, we are on Facebook. So follow us for more amazing opportunities like the one we had this afternoon. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.